He had imagined the reunion 1,000 times during those 10 years abroad. In his mind, it was always warm. His daughter would be standing at the airport gate, taller now, maybe with confidence in her eyes. She would run toward him, hug him hard, and complain about how long he took. He would laugh, say something corny, and promise to make it up to her with food. Always food. That was how families fixed everything back home. Reality waited for him instead in the form of a narrow driveway, a quiet suburban street in America, and a house that wasn't hers. Roberto stood across the road, suitcase still by his side, staring at the place his daughter lived in. 2 floors, white paint, neatly trimmed lawn, American flag near the door. Beautiful, comfortable, and not hers. He knew that because he could see her through the front window, bent over the floor, scrubbing it with a rag like it had personally offended her. She was wearing an apron. His daughter. His little girl who used to refuse to wash dishes because, "My hands will get wrinkly, Papa." The same girl who cried when she got a paper cut. The same girl he left 10 years ago so she could have a better future. Now she was on her knees cleaning someone else's house. Roberto's chest tightened so suddenly he had to sit down on the curb like an old man who forgot how to breathe. He hadn't told her he was coming. He wanted it to be a surprise, a grand entrance, a proud return. He even practiced the line on the plane. Papa's home. He didn't feel proud now. He felt stupid. A neighbor passed by, walking a dog. The dog sniffed Roberto's shoe, unimpressed. The neighbor smiled politely. "You looking for someone?" the neighbor asked. Roberto swallowed. "My daughter," he said softly. The neighbor glanced at the house. "Oh, you mean the maid?" The word hit him harder than jet lag. He nodded slowly, because what else could he do? Inside the house, Maria finished the living room and stood up, stretching her aching back. At 28, she felt 50. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message from someone she didn't want to read. She ignored it and went to the kitchen. The woman of the house, Mrs. Caldwell, was scrolling on her phone. "Maria," she said without looking up, "don't forget the upstairs bathroom today, and the guest room. My sister might come." "Yes, ma'am," Maria said automatically. Her voice had learned how to be small. She washed dishes that were not hers, in a kitchen bigger than the apartment she rented with 3 other girls. She watched the sunlight pour in through the window and wondered how her life had turned into this quiet, exhausting routine. 10 years ago, she was the hopeful one. She remembered standing at the airport, waving goodbye to her father as he boarded a plane to the Middle East. She was 18 then, angry but proud. "I'll work here," she told him back then. "You go earn. We'll meet again in America someday." America. The word had sounded like a miracle. Now it felt like a debt collector. When the doorbell rang, Maria froze. Visitors meant extra cleaning, extra eyes watching her work, extra chances to be reminded she didn't belong. Mrs. Caldwell sighed. "Maria, can you get that?" "Yes, ma'am." Maria wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the door. She opened it without thinking. "Good afternoon." Her voice disappeared. The man standing in front of her looked older than she remembered. Thinner. His hair was more gray than black now. His eyes had lines around them, the kind that came from squinting under the sun and worrying too much. But she would know those eyes anywhere. "Papa," she whispered. Roberto smiled, and it broke him. "There you are," he said, his voice shaking despite his effort to sound cheerful. "I was starting to think America ate you." She stared at him like he might vanish if she blinked. Then she laughed. It came out wrong, too loud, too sharp, but it was real. She covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled out anyway. "Papa, why didn't you tell me?" she cried. He stepped inside without asking and hugged her tightly, apron and all. He smelled cleaning chemicals and cheap soap and something else. Exhaustion. "My surprise worked, he said weakly. She hugged him back, but there was tension in her body, a stiffness he didn't recognize. Mrs. Caldwell appeared behind them. "Maria," she said, clearly confused. "What's going on?" Maria stepped back quickly. "Ma'am, this is my father." "Oh," Mrs. Caldwell said, eyebrows lifting. I didn't know you had family visiting. Roberto straightened his back. I'm sorry, he said politely. I didn't mean to disturb. I just arrived today. Mrs. Caldwell smiled tightly. Well, Maria still has work to do. Maria nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am, I'll finish the upstairs. She looked at her father, panic flickering in her eyes. I'll talk to you later, Papa, she said softly. Later. Roberto nodded, even though every instinct in him wanted to pull her out of that house immediately. Later, he agreed. He walked out, dragging his suitcase behind him, feeling like someone had punched a hole through his chest. Later came in the form of a small diner 2 blocks away. Maria arrived wearing a jacket that was too thin for the cold. She sat across from him, smiling like everything was normal. So, she said, forcing cheer into her voice, how was your flight? Roberto stared at her. Why are you a maid? She flinched. There it was, the question she had been dodging for years. She laughed nervously. Ah, Papa, it's not like the movies. Everyone starts somewhere. 10 years, he said quietly. 10 years I worked abroad. No holidays, no birthdays, no sickness leave. All so you wouldn't scrub floors. Her smile cracked. I didn't ask you to, she snapped, then immediately looked guilty. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean that. Silence settled between them. Finally, she spoke. I had a job before this, she said. Office work, data entry, then things happened. What things? She stirred her coffee even though she hadn't added sugar. Friends, she said. Opportunities. Roberto frowned. Those are usually bad words together. She almost smiled at that. They said investing would be easy, that America rewards risk. I didn't want to be left behind. How much? He asked. She didn't answer. How much, Maria? Her voice dropped to a whisper. 80,000. Roberto stared at her like she had spoken another language. Dollars? He asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. He leaned back, rubbing his face. That's a whole house back home. I know, she said, tears welling up. I know. The story spilled out between sobs and laughter that didn't belong there. Fake mentors, promises of quick returns, friends who only called when money was needed, credit cards, loans. One bad decision stacked on top of another until she couldn't see the ground anymore. When I couldn't pay, she said, they disappeared. Of course they did, Roberto muttered. I lost my job. Then the apartment. This was the only work I could find fast. Roberto reached across the table and held her hand. When did you plan to tell me? He asked gently. She looked away. Never. That hurt more than the debt. I didn't want you to think leaving was a waste, she whispered. I wanted you to be proud. He squeezed her hand tighter. I was proud the moment you were born, he said. Everything after that is just extra. She cried then, properly, loud and ugly and unfiltered. Other diners glanced over, then looked away. Roberto waited. He let her cry like she used to as a child, until the storm passed. When she finally calmed down, he smiled faintly. You know, he said, back home, if you live in someone else's house and clean, we call that being part of the family. She laughed through her tears. Only in the Philippines. He leaned forward. Come home with me. She froze. Papa, we'll fix this, he said. Not all at once. Slowly. Together. My debts. America will survive without you, she hesitated. What if I fail again? If I fail. He shrugged. Then you fail where people love you. For the first time in years, Maria felt something loosen inside her chest. Hope. Small, fragile, but real. Outside, the cold American wind howled past the diner window. Inside, a father and daughter began planning a return, not as losers, but as survivors. And for the first time since he arrived, Roberto felt like his surprise had finally led to something right. The airplane dipped through the clouds, and the Philippines rose beneath them like a memory refusing to fade. Maria pressed her forehead to the window as green islands appeared, scattered across the blue like something carefully placed by hand. Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warmer. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Home. Roberto watched her from the aisle seat. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight she'd been carrying had finally decided to rest somewhere else for a while. She still wore the same jacket she'd brought from America, even though the cabin was warm. Habit, maybe. Or armor. "Papa?" she said suddenly, eyes still fixed outside. "What if people judge me?" He chuckled. "They will." She turned to him, alarmed. "Relax," he said, smiling. "They judge everyone. It's our national sport. But they'll feed you first before doing it." That earned him a small laugh, the real kind. When they stepped out of the airport, the heat hit her like an embrace she hadn't asked permission for. It smelled like humidity, fried food, exhaust, and something deeply familiar. Maria inhaled slowly. "I forgot it smells like this," she murmured. Roberto grinned. "That's the smell of life and bad decisions. You'll get used to it again." The ride home was loud, chaotic, and unapologetically Filipino. Jeepneys fought for space, tricycles cut in without shame, and vendors shouted with voices trained by generations of survival. Maria watched it all like someone waking from a long sleep. Back in America, everything had been quiet, orderly, lonely. Here, even the noise felt like company. Their barangay hadn't changed much. Same sari-sari store on the corner. Same neighbors who pretended not to be curious while clearly being extremely curious. The moment Maria stepped out of the car, someone gasped. "Maria!" She turned and saw Aling Nena rushing toward her, arms wide. "Uy! You're back!" the woman exclaimed, hugging her tightly before Maria could even respond. "You got thinner! America is not feeding you, ah?" Maria laughed helplessly. "Apparently not." Within minutes, word spread like wildfire. Doors opened. Faces peeked out. Smiles appeared. Questions followed. "Back for good? Vacation lang? Uy, ang ganda mo pa rin." Roberto stood back, watching as the community he remembered wrapped itself around his daughter without asking for explanations or resumes. No one asked about her debt. No one asked about her failure. They just asked if she was hungry. The house was smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she was just used to bigger spaces now. Still, when Maria sat on the worn sofa, listening to the familiar hum of the electric fan, something inside her finally unclenched. That night, she slept without dreaming. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of laughter and sizzling oil. She stumbled into the kitchen to find Roberto flipping eggs while their neighbor S-Kid watched like it was a cooking show. "Papa," she said groggily, "since when do you cook?" "Since retirement," he said proudly. "I now specialize in eggs that look sad but taste okay." She laughed and sat down. As she ate, Roberto watched her carefully. "So," he said casually, "today we go to the market." Her shoulders stiffened. "Why?" "Because," he said, "you need to remember how real people live." She raised an eyebrow. "Was America fake?" "No," he said, "just very good at pretending money is the only problem." The market was alive in a way America never was. Fish flopped in buckets. Vendors joked with customers. Someone argued loudly over 5 pesos like it was a matter of national importance. Maria found herself smiling for no reason. She helped an old woman carry bags. She laughed with a vendor who recognized her. She even bargained again, badly, but with enthusiasm. Later, as they rested near a carinderia, Roberto spoke. "You don't have to stay forever," he said. "But while you're here, help." She nodded slowly. "Help who?" "Everyone," he said, "including yourself." That afternoon, Maria visited the old public school she used to attend. The classrooms were the same, the paint more faded, the chairs still uncomfortable. A teacher recognized her. "Maria, ikaw ba yan?" "Yes, ma'am," she said shyly. When the teacher heard she had worked abroad, her eyes lit up. "Can you talk to the students tomorrow?" she asked. "About life?" Maria hesitated. "What would I say?" The teacher smiled. "The truth." The next day, Maria stood in front of 30 restless students who barely cared that she had once lived in America. She took a deep breath. "I thought leaving meant winning," she began. The room quieted. She spoke about pressure, about bad decisions, about friends who weren't really friends, about how easy it was to lose yourself chasing something shiny. She didn't hide her mistakes, and something unexpected happened. They listened. Afterward, a girl approached her. The girl said softly, "I'm scared of failing." Maria smiled gently. "Me too, but failing doesn't mean you're finished." That night, she cried again, but this time, it wasn't from shame. It was from relief. Days turned into weeks. Maria helped at the barangay hall. She assisted small vendors with basic online listings. She taught kids English in the afternoons. She laughed more, ate more, slept better. Her American debt still existed, but it no longer defined her. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Maria spoke. "Papa," she said, "I don't feel useless anymore." He nodded. "That's because you never were." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I might go back someday," she said, "to face everything properly." He smiled. "That's good. And if I don't?" "Also good," he said. "The Philippines has a way of forgiving people who try." She laughed softly. "Even stubborn ones?" "Especially stubborn ones." As the sky darkened and the neighborhood lights flickered on, Maria realized something profound. She hadn't returned to the Philippines to escape her past. She returned to remember who she was before she believed she had to earn her worth. And this time, whether she stayed or left, she would carry that truth with her. Not as a maid. Not as a failure, but as a daughter who came home and chose to stand again.